Hey, well, I figured we'd try something a little different today. We're actually going to do a drive to my grandpa's house. He's no longer living. He died back in 1989, but I remember Saturdays, my dad would take me, my sister, and my mom out to my grandfather's in Pine Grove. It's a really neat, nostalgic drive for me. A really pretty drive, too. So a number of people have said that they really wanted me to start potentially doing some drives. So I figured this will be the first one I do. I might do another one while I'm over there called Over the Mountain and Back Again, which is going over Blue Mountain via 501, and then you can make your way over to, I believe it's Route 645, and go back over the mountain back to Pine Grove. So I figured that'd be some cool things, and maybe do the first country road to take us home out in the Outwood and Sueberg region, which is a really pretty area. So with that, we're going to go to Grandpa's place like I did back in the day. This is right here where our lane came out to make a right and go out to Route 443. So I'm going to take you along here. We're going to try to figure this out, maybe add some music in. I'm not going to be yipping yapping too much. And then we'll go out to Pine Grove, go by where my grandfather lived, and then maybe go out the ravine, because I want to go and visit my aunt's grave site, because I found out my dad's sister had passed away last year, end of May, and via the Find a Grave app, and wasn't really expecting that, but I'd like to visit her grave site and ravine. We may wind out going and visiting my grandmother's grave at this same cemetery, and my uncle Ernest, which was Ruth, who was Ruth's husband. So we're making a left here on Route 443, and we're going to be heading up to Pine Grove. This is originally the road, I guess is Route 72, but Route 443 mainly went more along the Sueberg Creek. You could have went straight across there, and that took you down to meet 72, and then make a left to take 443 north, and that took you up to Pine Grove. At some point, I would like to take you guys back there, like bike riding, and just talk about. That's where they had the Sueberg State Park dam they were going to put in, and wound up taking a lot of people's property via eminent domain. So I'd like to go through there and talk about some of the people, the properties that were back there, and just go through and talk about the history of that side of the Fishing Creek Valley, and what was once part of Greenpoint. Pretty neat area. Like I said, a lot of stories, but I'm gonna quit yip yapping, talking about some whatnot, and just let you enjoy the drive. And I'll talk about some different things, point some things out as we go along, some cool places and things of that nature. So enjoy the ride, everybody. Coming up here in a second on the left is the road that goes back to Gold Mine. At some point, I'd like to take you on a road trip back through there as well. They have a trail there in between two mountains that you can go back to a place called Stony Valley. Really pretty area to hike. That's where Cliff the Wandering Woodsman got his start with his channel. He used to go back through there quite a bit. There's a cool area called Roush Gap, and then Cold Springs. I think another one called Yellow Springs, but it's pretty neat area going back through there. But it's they also have if you remember from videos with Wandering Woodsman, he and I went up there a couple times it's called the Boxcar Rocks. Some of them are big stones, big rocks, but then a lot of it is like a sedimentary type, sort of almost like a cement mixture of small stones and whatever it is that makes it up. But it's a pretty neat spot. We used to stop there. They used to have a food, like a vegetable stand. And on the way over to my grandfather's, my dad loved tomatoes, and we'd stop there. It's just a neat area, and it's very nostalgic. And always loved coming back through here. And at some point, once they get this road fixed, because I think the bridge got blown out when we had the flooding come through with Ida or whatever that was. It blew the bridge out there, but that's the way I'll go and take you to some really cool bridges. This here is Twin Grove Park. This has actually got quite a bit of age. It was left derelict for a while. It's a cool place. There's a restaurant there. I think it's called Nothing Fancy. A lot of cool rides, ice cream shop, miniature golf course, that type of stuff. Great place for RV camping. But that was a place that was around back when my dad and his sister Ruth were kids, and they could take the railroad up here, and then Dad Milton would give them a bunch of money, and they could spend it on cotton candy and all the rides, because they had a really neat bumper cars that was really renowned. It was quite old, from the teens, I believe, and then a merry-go-round, which from what I had heard, the old wooden horses, Disney World had bought their merry-go-round for quite a bit, and it's a shame it's not there anymore, but to be able to do the other renovations that they wanted to do, it's understandable that they would do that. But Dad used to talk about that. They used to love it. There used to be a swimming pool on the other side of the road. There might be some foundations there yet, but nothing much is left there. But it was just a neat place from his youth that he remembered really fondly, and his sister did as well, Ruth, because they used to talk about it all the time. And this is where we're coming up on Sueberg here shortly. I'll talk about, there's a lot of family history, but Outwood is coming up here as well, which it'd be off the beaten path here off of 443. There's a couple of different places where you can make a left, but that was the one video that I did, the Miller family history at Outwood Cemetery. I believe it's a Lutheran church. I believe like a Lutheran, an evangelical Lutheran. But you can make a left right up here. Another guy that has a really nice fruit stand fruit and vegetable stand, whether it's open anymore because it's getting to the end of the season. But you make a left there, you go back to Outwood. It's a pretty neat place. And then coming up here shortly is Sueberg, where there's a lot of family history. I used to always love going by here. It was one of the last places where you could go and personally come and get some coal. I used to love it, see it in operation, because they actually have, which I'll show you, I'll swing the phone over that direction, but they have like the chutes that come down where they'll release the coal to go into your vehicle or whatever containers you have. I don't know if it's still in operation anymore, but it was up to a couple years ago. They still had, and it's right here to the left. I'll slow down. They had the coal chutes there where the coal would come down. It's quite an old structure. But this is Sueberg. And somewhere along in this area on the right, down a little bit near the train tracks, was the Sueberg Motel. Where it is exactly, Cliff and I tried to go back there to see if we could find the ruins or the foundations, and we couldn't find anything. But it's somewhere along there. And that was, there's whole stories to that. That was my great-grandfather Levi and great-grandmother Lavina owned that. and they had a livery there, post office, and all kinds of stuff. I'll have to post a picture at some point, because my grandfather Milton was behind the bicentennial for Pine Grove and had pictures of that. Had him and his brother standing there in front of the motel. This building here, this was owned by the family, some ancestors that had that as a general store here. Really pretty place. They still have the old store windows up front, and pretty neat. And somewhere back along here, I forget exactly where, but Gamelands bought it eventually. But to the right was an airport. It's called the Sueberg Airport. My dad used to fly out of that airport. He mainly flew out of, it's called Farmers Pride Airport in Fredericksburg, but they would fly over here. I think it had a Piper Cub and a Cessna that they used, and they had a airplane club that they all had an ownership stake in those airplanes. And the one airplane they bought from upstate Pennsylvania, and apparently the fabric on it wasn't very good anymore, and my dad ran into some storms, and he was the guy that got chosen to fly it back. And he said it was pretty terrifying. He was arriving back after dark, and at that time Farmers Pride didn't have lights on the runway, so all the other pilots had their cars sitting there with their headlights on so he could land the plane. But he said it was definitely, they shouldn't have done that, because they didn't realize how bad the fabric on the wings was and the fuselage, because he said it was not safe to fly that. But it was somewhere down here to the right, because I remember when I was a kid, when we went through here, you could still see the hangars before the Gamelands bought it and then tore all that down. But that was a bit of cool history. I always enjoyed when we came up through here. There's a McDonald's up here, and there was one on Cumberland Street that we used to stop. And when I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, but it was a real treat. We get to stop and get cheeseburgers or hamburgers or whatever, and that was back when the McBurglar was still around, because it wasn't teaching kids to steal stuff apparently, because kids are too impressionable today. But we used to love stopping at this McDonald's coming up. They had a play place, and they used to always really make, like, they take the colorful characters and they paint them on the windows, and it used to be such a cool experience. We'd come up here on those Saturdays, and on the way back we'd stop and we'd get ourselves some cheeseburgers and some fries, and it was just, I always loved coming up here to see my grandpa. It just, there's a certain smell to it. It's like a dated feel, and it just, I don't know, you go through certain areas. I used to do the floor work going up through central New York to Finger Lakes, but that's the McDonald's. Now it's looks a lot different, but it just had that same sort of feel and smell, like it was dated to like the 80s. And there's so many things that used to be here that aren't here anymore, and it makes you sort of sad, because it's like, I remember this and that isn't here anymore. And I remember we used to come up to our dentist, and he turned out to be a little bit of a creeper. But I remember we used to come up to Pine Grove to get that done, and it was always, we made a lot of trips up to Pine Grove and Ravine. My aunt lived in Ravine, and I guess when they were kids, where she lived, the house next door was where they lived as kids. And just a lot of great memories of up through here on Route 443. We used to go up beyond Ravine then. It's a little town called Mollystown. There's a free spring that you could go and get water from. And eventually someone bought it, and then they put all kinds of chlorine and stuff like that in it. It didn't taste the same. But we used to come up like every 2 weeks. We'd come up, and my mom and I would usually go and get the water, fill all the water bottles, because our water was a little nasty. So we would get our spring water from up there past Ravine. Just a cool, really neat area. But I'm gonna be quiet again and let you guys enjoy the drive. It looks like they got a little bit of a rain up here. But this is Route 443. We're heading up only a couple miles from Pine Grove. Here's Route 645. This is where, when we do the over the mountain and back again, this is where we'll come back out to Pine Grove. And here we are at the very beginning of Pine Grove. This place always intrigued me because it was like an archery shop, but I'm assuming because of the hangover, it was probably a gas station at some point back in probably like the 20s, 1920s. A lot of really neat. There's a historic district here in Pine Grove. A lot of really neat buildings. Old movie theater here. I'd like at some point, I said I want to do a series on the old movie theaters. And this is one of them I'd like to hit. Oh, there's a really old cemetery. I didn't realize that was there. I think that's the one they were talking about. That's a Revolutionary War cemetery. We'll have to stop there at some point. But there's somewhere along here is a house called Nutting Hall, and it actually has the people that built it originally. There's a connection to George Washington with their families, the Lay family. I don't think that's it, but that's a really cool stone building. Just a lot of really neat. It's one of those. It's towns that has the old main street, 40s, 50s feel to it to a degree. A lot of really cool churches. I'm gonna quick pull over so this person can get by me, because otherwise I'll get upset. But it's a good place to pull over. This is the old Pine Grove Theater. Pretty neat place. Like I said, I'd like to do a video on that at some point, because they say it's pretty neat inside of there. And once again, a lot of really cool buildings. I remember as a kid coming up through here. So many neat old houses, and I'm gonna go past where we normally would turn to go to my grandfather's house, because there's a really cool, there was an old 5 and 10 store. I don't know if any of you remember back in the day, like the 80s and maybe a little bit in the 90s, they used to have these nickel and dime stores, like the 5 and 10 stores they called them, and really nostalgic. You could get all kinds of like really cool things, and we'd stop right here where this pharmacy is. There used to be an old car wash garage there, but they tore it down for some reason. But right in there, it used to be a 5 and 10 store. And along here somewhere, if I can pick it out, is where my dad used to take me to a barber. I think it was one of these. I think that building right there with the glass front. They used to have the barber chair up in there, and all the old guys would be talking Pennsylvania Dutch. We're going to make a right here off the top of Hawken onto, I believe it's Pottsville Road. This is Route 209 here. I believe Ralph and I, when we did our Jim Thorpe trip, we came back, but just some of the older places here, just beautiful town. A lot of really older places, and we're gonna turn, I believe this is the road, Spruce Street, if I remember correctly. And I used to love, when we came here, it was an old trailer, and he had I'm trying to think what her name was, but it was an older lady that he lived with, and it wasn't Edie, but it was something I think with an E. And they used to sit there. Used to be an old porch in the back, and they would be sitting back there at the back of the yard, and we'd go back to see them. And just a pretty little street. It's right coming up here, actually. believe it is this place right here. Yep, this is it right here. It's a lot different than what it used to look like, and like I said, I don't think the the old porch isn't back there anymore. We're gonna make it right here, go back out to Tulpahawk and our main street. But there used to be an old like patio porch back there, and they'd be sitting back there, and we'd go sit down with them. And I just remember it used to always have this Stauffer's animal crackers, the little box that had looked like it was a railroad car, and he always had that for us. And he had a really neat clock, like a cuckoo clock, that used to go off every hour. And I just remember a lot of those different things, and there's a certain smell to the place, and just a feel, and like I said, it's very, very nostalgic. But we're gonna make it right, and we're gonna go down to Ravine from here. And I think where we're gonna finish off is at the War Memorial. My dad's on there, and a lot of other of his friends from Ravine. And then I'm gonna make a personal trip over to the cemetery there to go visit the gravesite of my Aunt Ruth, Uncle Ernest, and my grandmother Eva Miller. Yeah, just really cool. I love how they made the houses back then. They have the old American Legion post. And a lot of these is cool. They have like names for the mansions of the people that originally built them, and they were sort of known as those houses. This is the town I'd like to do a walking to Maine, and then go through the Pine Grove Historical Society and sort of go through the different buildings, their history, because I like to do that in Palmyra. There's a town right near me that have a heritage tour that you go through, and tells you the history of a number of the different buildings and the significance and that type of stuff. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool thing. I'll have to do it in a couple different videos because there's a lot of buildings, probably like 60 or 70 of them. Some I'm gonna have to drive to, so I'll probably have to do it in 2 or 3 videos. But I think that'll be a cool video for us to do as well at some time, and just see the history of these small towns. But we are coming to the end of Pine Grove here shortly, and then we'll be entering Ravine shortly thereafter. We used to make a lot of trips, like I said, to go get the water down near Mollystown, and also we would come down here to Ravine to see my Aunt Ruth, who sadly now has passed away. Actually, I'll show you too. There's the old one-room schoolhouse in Ravine is still in existence here along the main stretch, so I'll peek that over at that as well. And up here on the left is this is the village of Ravine, and to the left here is the old Pine Grove bowling alley, Pine Lanes. We used to take the kids' youth group to that all the time. A lot of fun there. And then this is the place that Cliff and I like to eat, Buddy's Log Cabin. Great restaurant. A lot of good memories there. We try to go there as often as we can. But yeah. And right up here is Ravine. This is where my dad grew up as a child with his sister Ruth, and just a really neat area. It's right next to the Swati. And over here on the right, like I said, I'll try to get the camera over there, is right there. That's the old one-room schoolhouse that my dad and his sister went to. And then on here to the left is the church that my mom or my dad and aunt went to church, the Lutheran church, St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, and that's where she was an organist for like 70 years or something like that. It was a long period of time. And then I gotta try to find here on my phone where and right here is the war memorial. We will stop here. Quick put my flashers on, and then we'll go over and we'll quick check this out. If I can get out of the van. It's one of those few things that I have a lot of trouble with for some reason. I have trouble getting in and out of vehicles, especially trucks, but so they have the names that have 2 stars next to them were killed in action, and the ones with 1 star were wounded. We'll go over here. You'll see the name Arthur Lengel. That was my dad's best friend. He actually died in Normandy. I believe it was on Utah Beach. Earl Hubler was another one of my dad's really good friends. But there's Paul Miller. And up above there's a Paul Lehman. He was actually a tank commander in Africa. My dad's there. Frank Muchler, I believe he lived right across the street from my dad. He was a little guy, and they were really, really good friends. And this was put up by Ravine School District. But every single one of these young men made the choice to go and serve their country. And the odds of coming out of that sometimes weren't terribly good. Most of the boys came back, but it didn't always work out that way. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to try to find this cemetery, and we will see you on the next video. We'll see you about town. Thanks, everybody.